Welcome to the FCS, a part of FCS Fans Nation, where we go down all the jackrabbit holes, are loaded with hotter takes in the inferno, and have a bigger crown than Duke Dog himself. The show you didn't want, you definitely didn't need, but here you are. Let's get into this. All right, everybody, welcome back to the FCS, aka the Football Chris Show. If you've been paying attention in the offseason, stories are kind of few and far between. But one that keeps circulating on my timeline, being a big Sky guy, is kind of what's going on in Greeley, Colorado. So for that, we brought in basically the only person I know of that's been really deep diving in and covering it. We have Jaydn Watson-Fischer of the Greeley Tribune with me today. Jaydn, how are you?
I am doing all right. It's a little cold, but I'm surviving.
Yeah, it's that time of year where it's cold, and I know you guys. I don't know how long you've been covering the team, but Northern Colorado not playing in the spring was a smart decision. That was my least favorite part of spring football last year, which is how cold everything was. Driving the games, being at games, I was miserable. But
Yeah, no.
seems a little extra cold in Greeley, Colorado these days, though. Like I kind of touched on it in the intro there. This is something that kind of had been coming on my timeline through Twitter and Facebook about like, oh, all these players are transferring out of the program and this and that. And, it's nothing that I consider uncommon. I know, like, for instance, I'm here in Boise, Idaho. Brian Harsin just left the Broncos to go to Auburn, and Auburn is seeing similar trends where they're having a ton of players transfer out, including starting star quarterback Bo Nix. So it's not that I'm necessarily unfamiliar with the idea of like a new coach comes in, tries to change the culture, and some players just aren't on board. But it sounds like at Greeley, the more I've dived into this and been reading your stuff on the Greeley Tribune, there's a lot more behind the scenes than just players not liking the culture. Is that kind of correct? Or can you kind of explain a little bit about what's leading to some of these transfers?
Yeah, so obviously the transfer portal and some of the new rules have made, going somewhere else a little bit easier than in years past. Um, and like you mentioned, a new coach, some transfers are expected, it's kind of part of the sport now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had started hearing stuff early in the season, even in the summer about concerns about the staff, and whether or not it was truly invested in all of the players. Um, a lot of communication stuff came up first. They were concerned that, hey, our coaches aren't around enough. At least that's what they felt. Um, are they going to be able to really develop us if they're not answering text messages or phone calls? And but at the same time, again, there's so much nuance with the sport. There's always going to be some players who are a little bit more favored. That's
Yeah.
normal. um
And correct
and
me if I'm wrong, wasn't it some of the players' initial issues, like I think what you're talking about with the beginning of the year, just to walk people through kind of the whole process, is Ernest Collins, there for a long time, basically known as one of the top player coaches in the entire division. His
yeah.
players loved him even without the winning, which sometimes that can, create resentment by players when they're not winning, but that didn't seem to be the case in Northern Colorado. And I believe there was somebody on staff that most of the players really wanted. And I believe maybe it was even like an open letter to administration about saying hire this guy, and they chose not to go with him and bring in Ed McCaffrey. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, there was I'll be honest, my institutional knowledge is a little bit limited, and his name is not coming to mind. He was one of the defensive coaches, I believe.
Okay.
Uh, um, but there were also suggestions that maybe Mike Armour, who was a longtime assistant at UNC, that he could potentially, be that next guy. And so, yeah, you're right. There was, I think, a little bit of skepticism when Ed McCaffrey was hired. Again, normal. But I think the players at first, they were just unsure, but the university really sold him. They said the NFL career, he's going to be great. He's going to bring all these wins to the program. And, first seasons are usually rough.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Were most players though, like you always hear that's usually the vocal minority you hear from your understanding or your kind of, from the outside view. I know you can't be in the locker room, but from what you were able to cover and see and be a part of, did it seem like the majority of players were excited about Ed McCaffrey, or were a lot of people hesitant last year when this hire was made? Because I just remember seeing online some of the Northern Colorado fans, from the fan perspective, were extremely excited about McCaffrey. We had a couple, one of them predict that they were going to finish top 3 in the Big Sky this year. So I know there's like a lot of expectations from the fans. Were the players kind of similar, thinking, okay, this might work?
I think they were hesitant, understandably, but I think a lot of them really did want it to work. I think they were really hopeful that like you said, maybe they could finish high. And most of them, just from the conversations I've had with them, they seemed open to trying it.
Mm-hmm. So then kind of go into, kind of what we've been hinting at. So what changed in the, 12 months or so since hire to hopes high? Some people are on board. Most people are hesitant, but on board to here we are about a year later, a little more from the hire. And it's a completely different, atmosphere right now. It feels like it's the biggest mess in the FCS at the moment.
Yeah, I think guys are saying, what's normal in terms of favoritism, in terms of, communication is just, it's gone way further than what they expected. They said a head coach is not going to be able to talk to every single guy all the time. But, when multiple texts are going unanswered by him or even their position coaches, that's really concerning. They talked about just lack of preparation, and they didn't feel like the film sessions were truly effective, or that not everyone felt like it was an environment conducive to just good criticism, constructive criticism. It was either, some players never did anything wrong and other players, could never do anything right. And they felt like there was no in between. There were also allegations of potential NCAA violations with how the university handled financial aid. Administrators are obviously strongly denying that. But at this point, it's really hard because it's kind of a university's word against the player's word, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some stuff that you can't get for legal reasons, and these players are saying, well, we can't give you anything because it supposedly doesn't exist. So it's a mess. And I know some people are going to say that, well, I only talked to 7 players out of 100. Therefore, these are only a few disgruntled players, but those were just the ones that went on the record, right?
Yeah. And of course, there's 2 sides to every coin. Like, somebody's going to probably see this episode and be like, well, okay, that's disgruntled people that want to leave the program. It's like, obviously we're acknowledging that side of it, or at least I am. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but of course, just the side of the story that some players love him, and probably a lot of the players he's brought in. That's part of the culture change. I don't have any of the numbers in front of me. I would be shocked if any of the players that he has brought in as part of his recruiting classes feel this way. I would have a hunch to say it's the majority of former players, which kind of ties into what we're talking about, where that's just kind of part of the game now, especially with the transfer portal. I feel like back in the day, kids just had to bite it and wait till either they could grad transfer or they just quit football or they just wrote it out, were disgruntled, collected their scholarship money, and graduated. But with transfer portal now, you have this option to leave. And with NIL, players have kind of been empowered more to where stuff like this, the coach isn't almighty over them. And so a disgruntled player can voice frustrations. I know my school, the University of Idaho, we saw some of this as well, where a lot of players, when Paul Petrino was fired, were actually upset because they love Paul Petrino. And then there were some players that have not been fans of him. So you see it all the time with stuff like this. But I guess what you were talking about, and obviously it's all hearsay right now, but you're talking about, if I understood it right from reading, there's allegedly that the coaches were taking away scholarships, correct?
Yeah, there's this out there, they're saying that they are reducing financial aid and not notifying the players, which, again, the university is saying this isn't happening, but because of federal laws, they can't just hand over things.
Yeah, exactly.
And the players are saying the opposite.
Yeah. Man, I don't know who has the law school out there, but this is just asks for like a class action lawsuit. But I guess in your opinion, covering the team, I know it's early. We just had signing day. I would assume I haven't gotten to all the signings and everything like that. I don't know when this episode will post, but I would assume even with this, the signing class was probably pretty good because it's still the reason they hired Ed McCaffrey is that, like, name recognition. He can bring in athletes that probably otherwise wouldn't have looked at Northern Colorado, might have chose a walk-on at like a Colorado State or Colorado over going there. What can this be turned around? Do you feel like some of the players coming in are kind of counteracting this? Like you said, you have people on the record against it. Are you kind of hearing behind closed doors or off the record that some people are okay with it and maybe this can be turned around and this season the Bears could make that step forward that many maybe over predicted that would happen last year? Or do you think this is going to compound on itself?
Well, I haven't talked to any of the new recruits personally. They think, at least from their public social media posts, that they're kind of siding with him and the current staff. But there are a number of players who did come in under McCaffrey, who were recruited by him and his staff, who truly don't believe that, this can be turned around unless, there's a little bit of acceptance that maybe things did go wrong. A lot of them really want just the, I don't want to say admittance, but just the acknowledgement, I guess, that their experiences were valid and their whether or not the university or the coaching staff feels that their stories are totally accurate, that how they are feeling is valid. Yeah. Most of them feel like they haven't been listened to at all, and no one is even like considering that things could have gone wrong. And I think that's the problem. Because most of them want an apology. They just want to say, hey, we're sorry you felt this way. We're going to see if there are changes to be made. And I think that's what they want to hear, and they haven't heard it so far.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, I'm sure they coached us all day. That's just owning up to your mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, that means you don't think you did anything wrong. And when you have a locker room of, I don't care if it's even 15 players, right? That's 15 more people than you'd like to be disgruntled with you when you're in charge of leading student athletes. So I see that point. I do look at the recruiting class. I mean, they've got some good signings. Fisher Clements. They've got 2 transfers, kid from Colorado. Also Jacob Sermon, who used to formerly start at UW. But I do notice, and I know they're probably trying to turn around the program, a little bit heavier on the transfer and JC route than necessarily all high schools. Got transferred from Navy as well, Butte JC, and Northwestern. I think, I guess from my opinion, it'll be curious to see how this plays out this year. I don't know what his contract is. I'm assuming it's 3 to 4 years. I'm not familiar with Northern Colorado's finances, but I'm assuming a buyout is probably going to be unlikely of McCaffrey. So the only way this would happen for a change would be due to cause. And I wonder how much of this goes away if they start winning. I guess that's kind of where I'm at with this, and why I was interested in having you on is like, I look at it and I'm like, how much of this is just disgruntled, former players, and how much of this is like going to continually be an issue going forward. So I think we'll be curious with this third class that he's been able to bring in, 2.5, what that does look like, and if Northern Colorado can pull it around, because we talk about it within big sky circles. You look at a school that had all this D2 success and everything. They finally, Ernest Collins obviously wasn't getting the job done. It was time to make that move.
Right.
Was McCaffrey the right hire? And I think that's what everyone's looking at, because it's just funny how 12 months ago there was so much hype behind this program. And then it feels like within another 12 months, it's just like, you look at it from the outside to where like people from the outside are like, what is going on with Northern Colorado? And I was like, I would like to hear more about it, because I also want to know what is going on with Northern Colorado. Yeah, but that's kind of all the questions I have for you. Do you have any like closing takes or remarks or anything you'd like to kind of address before we close out here?
Yeah, I just think that in terms of if this would turn around if they were winning, I think potentially, but considering one of the biggest concerns from the the 24 or so players and families that I spoke to was that they don't think that they can get there because of the preparation and because of the development issues that they're claiming. They're really not convinced that they would get to the point with the record that any of this other stuff would be worth it. So who knows? And I've said this before, but these players and these families, a lot of people might want to say that they're just lying. They're just mad. They want to take him down. But these guys, I truly don't believe that they're lying. They have everything to lose and nothing to gain from what I can see.
Yeah, you're right. Because if McCaffrey gets fired, it doesn't benefit them any, especially if they're leaving or disgruntled or they're a senior. Yeah, you're right. Like you absolutely nailed it on the point of why people should trust the people that are saying this. They have nothing to gain. There's no financial gain. There's nothing. This is just literally student athletes, kids. I mean, I know they don't probably like being said that, but the majority of them are under 22 years old. Like these are just kids that are trying to go through life, and luckily people are raised differently now, and they have the confidence that when they see something wrong to call it out. So I'm with you. If anyone doubts what these players' feelings are, I would say that's the wrong approach to take with this. There's other avenues that might make the athletic department or the administration, I don't want to say more on the right, but have their point of view. And when you see that, you can be like, okay, I could see both, but you can't deny these players' feelings, and that, like you said, they have nothing to gain. So it's hard to deny that what they're saying isn't true. Can't say that it is, because I'm not in the locker room, but sorry. You said that. I'm like, I just need to nail that home. Like, yeah, of course. No, anyone that says these guys are lying or doing it out of spite, it's like they have nothing to gain from that. So
yeah,
and the internet can go crazy. So sometimes you got to just double down on. Hey.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want everything to be true. I think that's something that people might be thinking about me, but I don't want it to be true. It's not good for the university and the community, and it's not good for these players. So I hope there's something where there was just some miscommunication and maybe things can be fixed.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on to the FCS, aka the Football Chris Show, because my initials fit conveniently in the letters. Yeah, and it's glad to have you come on, talk Northern Colorado, a school that I actually like to talk about, but don't really get a lot of excuses to talk about. Something why I also hope this isn't true, because I think I would love to see Ed McCaffrey turn this team around. If not him, the
Yeah.
next guy. Because one, I would love an excuse to take road trips to Colorado. So I'm pulling for this team. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Interesting to see how Northern Colorado does this year. But I want to thank you for coming on. Let the listeners know how they can find you, interact with you, or anything else that you kind of want to share before we end.
Yeah, Twitter is J Watson-Fischer. Very long. It's my maiden name, so my actual bios is Jaydn Adams. It just hasn't legally been changed, so don't be confused. I do have a quote unquote professional Facebook page that I occasionally put stories on. But most of the journalism work is on Twitter. I guess they can follow me on Instagram if they want, but that's mostly my cats and outfits. So
well, we'll have them reach out on Twitter if they want your Instagram.
Okay, that sounds great.
Deal. All right, Jaydn, well, thank you for joining me, and I mean this as heartfelt. I'm pulling for the Bears, and thank you for all you're doing to cover a very undercovered team within the Big Sky and the FCS.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.